Yeah, I think there are many species that you could consider good species to start with. If I have to name a few, I think thamnophis is a very nice one to start with, but it's a very small one. If you like bigger snakes, thamnophis aqueous is a very nice one to start with. Or one of the thamnophis the subspecies, are also very good to start with. I think the crucial thing for a setup for these snakes is to have a completely dry setup.
Okay.
But what I put inside my terrariums is all a little bit the same. So I start with newspapers on the floor, just for easy cleaning.
Yeah.
Then I have a layer of wood chips in general. With some species I also use cocoa peat.
Yeah.
The wood chips I use the big size.
Okay.
And that is important.
Yeah, to provide them for mating.
Yeah, but if you have the very small ones and you give them, for instance, fish, then all those small wood particles they stick.
Yeah.
And they get all the wood inside and they can get blockage. And so if you have big wood chips, there's a small chance that they will ever ingest it. Furthermore, I use whatever I can find in my own garden. So I use branches and also if I am cutting branches, I just use everything from outside. I don't sterilize anything.
You know, the final questions would be about garter snakes in general.
Yeah.
They are one of the only species of snakes that can be described as sociable. You know, they like to be with each others.
Yes.
We spoke about thamnophis pietalis, you know, and the mating balls that we can observe in the wild. So, do you know why are they sociable? You know. Hard question.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I think they tolerate each other. And
but is there anything to explain that? Or?
But there's not really like a friendship or very much social behavior, I would say.
Are all the species sociable, you know, or some species more than others?
There are some species that are cannibalistic.
So which ones?
Well, Thamnophis elegans vagrans is known for it.
Okay.
So that's the wandering garter snake. Elegans terrestris maybe also, although I still keep them together. And one of my very favorite species, Thamnophis can become cannibalistic when they get bigger. So the cannibalistic ones you have to be a little bit careful with, but all the others you can easily keep together, because often people say, well, you have to keep them together because otherwise they will get lonely. No, they will not get lonely. I don't think so. I don't believe that. But let's say especially with babies, it helps to have many babies in one cage. For feeding.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if you feed that food, that prey, that doesn't move. But once one of the snakes takes a piece of fish or mice and moves to the terrarium, all of a sudden that piece of fish becomes alive, and everybody wants it. So that helps. Of course, it's also a headache because you have to separate them. But if you have 10 babies together and one is already eating well and really attacks ferociously, they all get more active and they think, oh, it's food, it's food.
Yeah. Other question. When you handle a garter snake, and I think we are going to have an example later, in another video, it can musk. What is that musk? Is it, urine? Is it what is that? What is composing the mask?
It's a combination of. It's just the feces, so the shit of the snake, combined with urine, but they also have glands. So in fact, it's
like colubrids, in fact, in general.
Yeah. So in fact, every garter snake species smells different. And of course, some people will say I'm lunatic, but there are some species I think, well, they smell pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah.
And some they smell horrible.
Stevens, told me when we met this morning. He told me, okay, so this is like my perfume sometimes. So
Yeah.
And okay, so so the mask is like so as you said, so shit and pee and
plus from
the glands.
From the glands, yes.
And some are going to bite more than others. I mean, among species. And the aquatic species, I've read that. Tell me if I'm right or wrong.
You're right.
This is, something pleasant.
Yeah.
I'm always asking Steven, okay, am I right or wrong? Many questions. But in fact, the aquatic species are known to be
more
bitey,
aggressive.
More aggressive than terrestrial ones.
Yeah.
Why? Do you know why?
The explanation is that in aquatic habitats, there are often herons.
You cannot mask, perhaps. No.
No. There are often herons walking around. So in those herons, they're predating from above. So that's why a lot of the aquatic species have to defend them way more, because they're swimming in the open and they're way more exposed.
Okay, so it means that perhaps a good way to handle them is not to come
exactly
above, like for many snakes, in fact.
Yes. So if you, so that would be also another advice. They make a terrarium where you can open the glass from the front. And not that you have to open the lid. So in the past I started with an old aquarium and I put a wooden lid on it, and maybe some people still do that.
And you were like a heron each time you
I was like a heron. So you open it up. So there's two problems. If you open it up, they can crawl out on all sides. And if you close it, you might hurt them. And they always feel threatened. But if you come from the front, they don't feel threatened.
Okay. Next question. Many people in France, for example, they only consider, and this was my case at the beginning, I have to be humble. At first, I only considered that the difference between garters was mostly about colors, about coloration. I think this is a mistake that many people do at first. There are many other differences, in fact, and many other interests that you can discover. Especially about behaviors. Can you tell us, for example, one aquatic snake, one very terrestrial, the fact about what they eat, etc., etc., just to give to people some examples of the different species and different behaviors they can observe with the snakes.
Okay. Well, if you start
question was long.
Yes, it was a very long question. If you start with the most famous one, Thamnophis sirtalis, the eastern garter snake, that's in fact quite a terrestrial one. So it lives in areas where there is water.
But they're not going to use it that much.
So that's the problem. Whatever answer you give, there's always populations that are more aquatic than others. So that's for me another reason I want to know where they come from. So I know.
This is why this is important, because as you told us before, the geographical repartition of those snakes are from Canada to Florida. So this is very
huge.
Space.
It's huge. It's
so
huge.
Of course the behaviors are going to be different.
But the eastern garter snake, sirtalis, is quite a terrestrial one. That's why it's very inclined to feeding on worms, for instance. They like worms a lot, and they eat massive amounts of worms as babies. And when they're bigger, they are also they will eat more frogs and sometimes even mice. Then, if you take another very terrestrial one, that's Thamnophis elegans terrestris, so the coast garter snake. They live in coastal dunes in California, and they are known to eat a lot of slugs. So the snails without a house.
Yeah, for sure.
And
limaces in French. Limaces in French.
Limaces, okay. They also eat. They are known to eat mice. They are also known to hunt for little birds. So they have a very terrestrial food choice.
And next, what about aquatic snakes?
But then you take aquatic space. Well, if I think about what I have right now, the most aquatic species are maybe Thamnophis atratus, which you see there, but also Thamnophis cauchi, which I'm very proud to have bred for the first time this year, and the first time probably anybody has bred them in captivity in Europe, or maybe even worldwide. Well, unless a German friend of mine, he beat me to it last year. But anyway, they are highly aquatic, so they live in mountain streams that are fast flowing, and they're very much like the dye snake from Europe. So they hunt underwater. They have very good vision underwater, and they can see the fish, and they will move towards the fish and grab it. Whereas if you give fish to an eastern garter snake, he will just go in the water bowl and he will just swim like crazy until he accidentally hits it, and then he grabs it. So that's his feeding technique. But the cauchi, he can see, so he's looking or from above or in the water, and then boom, they grab it. And so all those differences you can observe by keeping them in captivity.
Final question about
about the food.
Yes,
because we haven't talked about food.
Exactly. This was what I was going to ask.
Okay.
In fact, so you have the B1 vitamin problem, but I've already spoke about that on the YouTube channel. So we are not going to speak a lot about that. I've read a study by Henry Fitch, who analyzed the stomach of many snakes. I think it was 200, something like that. I think it was parietalis. Okay. And he discovered no fish at all. Yeah. There were amphibians. There were
worms.
Exactly, worms. You had some rodents too, not a small part, but salamanders. Well, but no fish. It means that in the wild, can you confirm me? Because in France, many people ask, okay, so I'm going to take a garter snake, but he eats only fish. This is not the case.
No, it's not the case.
And can you feed your garter mostly on rodents? Or is it a problem?
No, it's a very good and interesting question, and I have to be very humble there, because then I have to tell a story about myself. I've always, since I started, I've always been feeding them fish. The main fish I always fed them was smelt, éperlan. And I think that's a very good food source, and I would say 90% of all the garter snakes will eat it, can feed on it, and can live very happily on it.
If you implement, of course.
Of course, you need the B1. Yeah, so let's say the general conception that thiaminase is a big problem. If it's that in the fish, no, I think it's not a big problem if you have pure B1. But you already explained it in your own video. So with always adding B1, you overcome that problem.
Yeah. Now about the type of prey.
The type of prey, exactly. One thing I noticed in 2 or 3 years ago that when I started, all the smelt was from Holland, from an ocean close by. But they forbid to hunt for these fish, and now I get them from Turkey. And sometimes the quality of the fish is not so good. So
mine is from Turkey too.
Yeah, so I think everybody now has. I think the Latin name is Atera boyeri, and they still call it smelt, but it's
Atera boyeri. Yes, it's true.
It's a Turkey, and you can buy them in kilo bags. So I think it's good food, but I have found that it can start causing problems with breeding them. I think your snakes they look healthy and they will do fine. But sometimes you have litters that are not so good, and some small babies or deformities or dead babies.
Stillborn babies, perhaps.
Stillborn babies, and I attribute that to that there's not enough variation. So I was always a little bit proud. Well, I feed them just smelt, and it goes well. But maybe that also had to do with the quality of the smelt, and that's why I say you always have to keep an open mind, because there were that's funny. All the Dutch people, they were. You have to feed fish, and all the Germans and also the Americans, they say mice, only mice. I think
it's a combination.
I think the best way, and that's what I'm doing right now,
variation,
is a combination and variation. But I think what is very important about fish, because I said something about smell. A lot of people, they go to the shop and they buy trout. And they feed trout and say, well, I keep my snakes on fish, and that goes well for a little while, but then he starts to act a little bit funny. Well, what would happen if we would only eat eggs every day? Sure, yeah. So, if you feed fish, it's very important to eat whole fish. So that's what I like about the smelt.
Yeah.
So you have
the scenes too.
You have the intestines, you have the skin, you have the scales, you have the bones, you have everything.
Calcium.
So the only thing that you really need to add is B1 and every now and then multivitamin. And you can eat some calcium to be sure, but if you feed them pure fish meat, then you have to supplement way more. But what I would advise is, okay, either alternate or give them a little bit of both. So give them some fish and give them baby mice, rodents.
Okay.
And there are also people that feed chicken hearts and livers and things like that. I don't do that because I also think that's a little bit, but to combine it with fish, at least it gives them variation. I think that's good. But for me, I would say the perfect diet is baby mice and fish, maybe in a 50-50 portion.
And once more, think that...
And maybe one thing, a small thing to add.
Yeah, come on.
I would not feed too much mice with hair. So only
babies.
Only babies or the smaller ones. And maybe only the real terrestrial species like Elegans terrestris. Yeah, they don't mind if you give them big mice with hair. Because they are not able to digest the hair so much. Because, like you said, the study from Fitch, yes, you sometimes find rodents in the diets of garter snakes, but there are only a few species that really specialize on it, and that's maybe the Elegans terrestris, Elegans vagrans. They eat bigger portion of mice and maybe also consinus, but the other species are more amphibian eaters and sometimes also fish eaters and worm eaters, and it's all very easily digestible food.
Okay.
So that's why mice without hair is my advice.
Okay. You need to use sometimes products, to add powders, calcium, and to implement the food.
Yeah.
So I know you use mostly two kinds of, powders to implement it. Can you explain what and why?
So I use the B1, of course.
Yes,
so beside the B1 I use what in Holland it's called gistocol, but it's a calcium phosphor supplement. It's also used
I'm going to put pictures of the
yeah, so it's also in Holland it's sold in every pet shop because it's also
not in France, yeah.
Huh?
Not in France.
Not in France, okay, because it's used for dogs and for cats. So it's
and you have on the box, you have cats and
dogs. Yeah, it's standing there right there. So it has dogs and cats. And the other one is a multivitamin.
Nectin Rep?
Or another one, because Nectin Rep is more and more difficult to get, but I still can get it. It's a supplement with all the range of vitamins, A, the D3, also the B1s. But with that you have to be careful, because B1 you can give as much as you want.
Yeah, but it's not the case with all the vitamins.
No, the other vitamins, they can be toxic.
So this is my next question, and perhaps the final one. How often would you provide, those vitamins to the food of your snakes?
Well, the multivitamins I would do maybe once a month.
So for the Nectin Rep or the same product?
The Nectin Rep or something like that, whatever you can get. A multivitamin for reptiles, I would do it once a month. The B1 every feeding, and I think it doesn't hurt to always
so several droplets of B1?
Yeah, B1.
There is not a precise count?
No,
okay.
but just
it's
overdose.
Not hurting, so
it's not hurting. Yeah. And the last one is the gistocol. I would also do every time.
Okay, every time?
Yeah, I've started to do that every time.
Okay.
Yeah.
On any type of prey?
I'm doing it on every type of prey.
Okay.
But I would say I mostly on worms, because then it's very important.
Yeah, they're lacking in calcium.
They're lacking calcium, but let's say very small baby mice might also not have enough.
Yeah, because the bones are not formed yet, so.
Yeah. And also maybe some species need a little bit more calcium. So I've started to add, but it's just a little bit. I've started to add it, but I'm just doing it since 1 year. A little bit of gistocol to everything.
Okay, so Steven, I think, do you see something else to add or to tell to people, or another information that we could have not mentioned for the moment?
No,
I think it was quite complete.
We talked about many things.
Many things, yes.
There's many more things to discuss, but
yeah, exactly. So thanks a lot, and we are going now to film other things, the terrariums, and to speak about other things. So see you next time on the channel, and thanks a lot for that first interview, Steven.
Thank you very much.